So since Phyllis is not here, I'm going to read Emmett Fox. And once again, what I'm talking about is what appears Emmett Fox is talking about, and I had no idea because only read it 10 minutes ago. Isn't the divine wonderful and synchronicity? So it's called Are You Dynamic? And he writes, many people think they would like to be what is called dynamic, but it does not appear that they always have a very clear idea of what that expression really means. Aggressive and noisy, bombastic in manner. A dynamic person is one who really makes a difference in the world, who does something that changes things or people. The magnitude of the work done may not be great, but the world is different because that person has lived and worked. The real secret of a dynamic personality is to believe that God works through you, whatever you may be doing, to put his service first, and to be as sincere, practical, and efficient as you know how. And then from 1 Chronicles 28, know thou the God of thy father, and serve him with a perfect heart and with a willing mind. Emmett Fox. So I was led today by a comment in, of all things, a murder mystery. There was a discussion of some of the characters, some of the positive characters in the book who cast a long shadow. And I started thinking about that. In this case, casting a long shadow is a positive. And so the question I want to address is sort of multifold, but the overarching question I'm going to ask in advance so you can sort of hear things within this lens. Are you creating a shadow? If so, how long is your shadow? And Emmett Fox, in this reading, was addressing that, talking about dynamism. Now, coming from my background as a Quaker, Quakers believe that every one of us, being a part of the divine, is called to the ministry of working to make the world a better place, what I call lifting up the world. Now, being curious, I thought I'd see what other faiths view as our responsibility to this world if we are practicing. And you know what, I'm going to move over a little bit since Phyllis isn't here. So the Baha'is believe that our life's purpose is to progress spiritually by serving our fellow human beings. And these are quotes from Baha'u'llah, as I recall. In doing so, we acquire the divine qualities that we need in the life to come. And one of the interesting sidebar here is that the various Baha'i leaders clearly accept the idea that there are many lives that we live. Yay. The Sikhs believe that truthful living means never exploiting others. They call it kirat karni, meaning to work honestly, to live honestly, to practice honesty. And they regard that as one of the primary pillars of their faith. Hindus believe that there are 4 goals in human life. There's kama, the pursuit of pleasure; artha, the pursuit of material success; dharma, leading a just and good life; and moksha, enlightenment, which frees a person from suffering and unites the individual soul with the divine. Now, I was reading all these and thinking, you know, that's something that a lot of Western faiths have a different take on. And so I looked up, what is the teaching about Christian responsibility for this lifetime. And I found one Orthodox Catholic writing. We have been given our body, with Christian faith so that we might obtain eternal life and blessedness. And then I looked at other Christian writings, and pretty much they uniformly, if we're talking traditional churches, they uniformly talk about our goal is to get salvation on this earth. It doesn't say anything about this earth. In the Orthodox one, it says that we're supposed to be suffering here as a part of becoming more perfect to join God. Again, us. So let me go back to what the Quakers say. That it is our responsibility as part of our being the divine in us, the divine that is expressed through us, the part that we live in and around, that we are called to the ministry of helping this world become a better place. Now, as Emmett Fox says, you don't have to be big, noted, any of those things. Now, the Buddhists have a moral code that they talk about for while we're on this earth. Right speech, right action, and right living. And all of those are designed to help us transform the world. So my take is, or where I'm coming from, is the Baha'i outlook, the Quaker outlook, both of which are saying our job is to walk righteously in this world, to help the world become a better place. And that is part of being with and in and of the divine. Now, it's easy to think that we've got to be grandiose. I was thinking, okay, so what are some good examples of people well known? Well, Mother Teresa, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Dorothy Day of the Catholic Workers, and if you're not familiar with her, she founded settlements where the poor and downtrodden could come and live, could eat, and those who were serving them lived in poverty as part of the community. Nelson Mandela was another one, because he took what could be a hate-filled situation and moved it into righteousness and love. Okay, those are big ones. But let's look at small ones, because probably none of us is ever going to make a headline. Chances are good, most of us will not be known outside our family, our immediate community. But that doesn't mean we can't be doing good. And I came across in some of my miscellaneous readings a couple of examples that I'm going to read to you. People wrote in sharing their experience. And this was in response to a question: what's the smallest thing a person ever did for you that impacted your life? And this person wrote in, the year is 1974, and I am the junk dealer's daughter. My brother has become a teenager. My parents spend half their time watching my father slowly die and striving to save him, and the rest is struggling to survive. Our TV is off limits. The days are long, especially for an introverted kid. But I am not alone, for the bookmobile comes every other Thursday at 3 p.m. 3 years before my mom had walked me down the street and signed me up for the reading program. Read 10 books and get a sticker. Get the stickers and you get a prize. I had rapidly progressed from the small child's to the preteen books. And last year, the bookmobile lady had sent home a permission slip to allow me to read adult books. This year, she scours the county for good books for me. Smiling, she hands me a stack of 10 books. There's some new Westerns and a couple of sci-fi as well, if you want them. My book-a-day limit. I struggle home with my treasures. Another 2 weeks of adventures and stories. I don't feel as alone, and my belly doesn't rumble as much when I'm reading. Carefully, I opened the first page. The bookmobile lady has saved me once again. The year is 1994, and now I have a family to support. Going back to college was a good decision. My hard work and bright mind have been recognized, and I have risen from student worker to classified staff. Painfully shy, I stay to myself, but then another worker stops by and tells me, as a union member, I should be attending union meetings. I just want to fit in, I think. I'll slip into the back and hopefully no one will take much notice of me. Hey, Nancy, is that you, Nancy? The bookmobile is lady, older, but just as nice. Sit by me and my friends. Hey, everybody, this is Nancy. When she was little, she used to come down with a wagon full of books to exchange when I ran the bookmobile. She read a book a day. Isn't that cool? And just like that, I am no longer alone. The bookmobile lady has saved me once again. Small actions can save a life, can revitalize a life, can change a community. Another story. I glanced at my bedside clock. It was 2:45 in the morning when I heard a knock on my door. I live alone and my heart skipped a beat. I got to the door, looked through the eyepiece, saw a middle-aged man standing there. Who is it? I said. Sorry to trouble you. Have you lost a laptop? A laptop? I looked behind me to the dining room table where I usually charge the laptop. It wasn't there. I was just passing, miss, don't worry. But there was a laptop on top of the car nearest to your house. Yes, of course, I thought. Must have left it there when coming back home with the shopping and everything. It's mine, I say. Thank you so much. But then I kept quiet because I didn't know how to tell him that I wasn't going to open the door. He understood, though, and said, I'll leave it near the door, okay? I really wanted to open the door to thank that man, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Yes, I said, many thanks. Coward me only opened the door in the morning to let the laptop in. But that doesn't change the fact that there are some good people in the world. And one last one, and I do not remember where I found this one. 1980s USA, my family took in one of my high school friends who was kicked out at 18, about 2 months of high school left before graduation. She lived with us till the fall when she started college. We helped her to complete financial aid forms and college applications and applications for government benefits. After a year of college, she joined the military, since it seemed to offer the best chance of a good life. Now, this story is one of so many I have read on places like Quora of teenagers who were kicked out as early as 13 by horrendous parents and whose lives were salvaged, saved by parents or a community member, or in a couple of cases, teachers who took them in. Was that big? Was that noteworthy? Will they have gotten all sorts of notice from the press? No. It was people who chose to work out of human, divine caring and took risks to help someone who was hurting. They were lifting up. And in so many of the cases, the person writing in was the one who was taken in and who now regards them as mother and father and has his or her own family that they're raising and raising well because of having been cared for by what we'll call intentional parents. So this is what each of us is capable of doing. So I'm going to read some of the recommendations or suggestions from various spiritual leaders. Abdul Baha of the Baha'i faith says, let the light of truth and honesty shine from your faces so that all may know that your word in business or pleasure, thank you, is a word to trust and be sure of. Forget self and work for the whole. And then he also says, truth is high, but higher still is truthful living. By this, he means that living truthfully, showing devotion to truth through one's behavior and actions, brings one closer to spiritual awakening and to God. And this is one of the secrets of the Quakers, by the way. Yeah, Quakers started in the 1500s, just a small sect in Great Britain. And yet, because they openly stood for what they perceived to be righteous, they changed our English language. They changed how we purchase at stores. Before Quakers, we had what most languages still do, the informal you, thee, thy, thou. And that was used for us lower class people. And you had to address all the powerful people, the nobility, as you. Quakers wouldn't do that. They insisted on calling everybody thee, thou, thy, because we were all equal in the sight of God. And the nobility, despite those blank, blank, blank Quakers who were refusing to acknowledge their superiority, started using you for everybody. And guess what we do? Everybody is you, still equalized. Before the Quakers, when you went to a store, you had to bargain for every single thing you wanted to buy. The storekeeper would quote you a high price, you had to bargain them down. And if you weren't a very good bargainer, you paid way more than you should. The Quakers, being mostly merchants, said, since every person is a child of God, everyone should be charged just a fair price. And at first, they had hard times because people wouldn't go to them. What? They're not bargaining with me. I'll go where I'm no. But then mothers realized they could send a daughter or son down to get something, and the child would be charged the same price as if mother went. And pretty soon, strangers coming into town would ask where the Quaker merchant was, because they knew they wouldn't get cheated. How do I know what calls you have? I don't. But take a look at what you do and how you may already be serving. The Sikhs believe that truthful living will enable them to get closer to God. Telling the truth and being honest are important. So are living an honest life and making sure injustice in the world is dealt with. There is a Hindu guru, Sri Chinmoy. I know nothing much about him, but he chooses to recognize people from all walks of life who have inspired and uplifted humanity. And what he does, I have read, there's a special sort of platform you get to stand on if he recognizes you, and he lifts you up over his head. Now, this is a very slight man, but I see him lifting a full-grown male over his head to honor them for lifting up the world. I thought that was pretty cool. Then I came across a preaching by someone from the Mormon community called Lift Where You Stand. And to me, this might give you some more ideas for what you might be doing. And he tells the story. Some years ago in our meeting house in Darmstadt, Germany, a group of brethren was asked to move a grand piano from the chapel to the adjoining cultural hall, where it was needed for a musical event. None were professional movers, and the task of getting that gravity-friendly instrument, I love that, gravity-friendly, through the chapel and into the cultural hall seemed nearly impossible. Everyone knew this task required not only physical strength, but also careful coordination. There were plenty of ideas, but no one could keep the piano balanced correctly. They tried repositioning by strength, by height, by age. Nothing worked. And as they stood around the piano, unsure what to do next, Brother Hano spoke up. He said, "Brethren, stand close together and lift where you stand." It seemed too simple. Nevertheless, each lifted where he stood, and the piano rose from the ground and moved into the cultural hall as if under its own power. That was the answer to the challenge. And I suggest to each of us here, you don't have to look for a fancy situation, but you can lift where you stand. And if everyone in the whole world lifted where they stood, we would probably find ourselves well out of all the wars, all the contagion that we're experiencing right now. But each of us can lift where we stand and invite whomever is around us to lift with us. So think on that. He also mentions that those who struggle with the concept of lifting where you stand. He says there are two camps: those who seek to lead and those who seek to hide. Those who seek to lead can't imagine they can possibly accomplish something unless they are in some august position. Talking about Mormonism, the president or one of the counselors to the president or something like that. Well, then, he quotes, I could really do something. No, you can do it right now. You have the highest position there is. You are a part of God. You are integral with God. When you allow it, all of the divine power, all the power of the angels, all the power of those who serve on the other side that we cannot see are at your command, are there to help you so that you can all be lifting at once. Speaking of lift, for instance, I cannot claim for credit for that. The ideas were presented to me, and I had good fingers to type things out. And then Lori Kay came around, and she retyped it and made it even better. Wow. Thank you, Lori Kay, for your contribution. And then he mentions the speaker, those who seek to hide, who convince themselves that they have nothing to offer or that they're too busy. And he calls them on that because the divine will provide the way. And he closes his talk by saying, the Lord expects each of us to have a calling so that others may be blessed by our talents and by our influence. So, how are you called? Who do you know that has had influence in your life, or whom you've seen in their own humble way make a change? I was thinking about this, and I found I'm sorry, Mary, would you get me some water in this? Or Christy. And I found myself remembering 4 different older men who, when I was just a lad, and for all intents and purposes, fatherless. My father was a drunk if he wasn't working, and I'll credit him for working. He was sitting in the basement drinking or asleep. I had no male influence. And each of these men, unostentatiously, sort of stepped in and befriended me. Without their influence, I would not be who I am today. And I give them full credit for that. Thank you. So think, if you will, during our conversation about this, and when we go into meditation, who has influenced you? Who has influenced you? Or who have you seen? Who have you seen around you that was doing change humbly, not seeking acknowledgement, just doing what they were called to do? Consider what you have been doing, because I know every one of you, just from our conversations, has already been doing things to contribute to making this world a better place, to lifting up this world. Are there some opportunities that you're missing? No. Is there a calling that you're thinking, well, I'm too small? There's a story, I do not know if it's apocryphal or actual, though an actual name was given to the hermit. Back in the days of the Roman persecution of Christians, a hermit living up in the hills felt called by God to go down into the city and was led to go with the crowd into the Colosseum. And there, on the floor of the Colosseum, were a bunch of Christians being held at sword point. And the hungry lions were about to be released. And the crowd was cheering to see the Christians slaughtered and eaten. And the story goes, the hermit felt compelled and he rushed down the stairs, jumped over the wall into the center of the Colosseum and yelled to Caesar and all the powers there, "Stop, this is wrong." Or I don't remember the words, but it was something like this. And the guys promptly slew him. But by the time the lions were released, there was a steady stream of people leaving the Colosseum. And from that point forward, this article said, putting Christians and others to death for the entertainment of the masses ceased to be a desirable option. Now, by no means am I suggesting that any of us be that self-sacrificial, but the hermit didn't plan it either. But just as the Baha'i says, as the Sikhs say, as I think most of us believe, if we end up parting from this body in service, we're not gone. Emmett Fox says as much. This is just part of a continuum. Whatever we're doing, and Brother Mandis talked about this too. He was called, just one guy started something that has followers all over the world. And knowing that healing just happens. You don't have to be a bigwig like Oral Roberts praying night and day to heal somebody. Brother Mandis would just claim it, or his successors just claim the healing. It's just not that big a deal, and healings happen. So allow yourself to know your contributions. Allow yourself to feel called wherever. And that's what I have to say. Anyone else have something to contribute before we move to silence? And I'm sorry for having rattled on so long. Lori Kay.
I want to tell you a very short story. And the short story is, having gone through surgery and being taken into my friend's house for 4 days, when I came home as a single person, it was horrific to just be left here by myself, immobile, unable to get out. And long story short, I went onto Facebook and I wrote, "Help, I'm a prisoner. Somebody, please, if you have time, come and spend 30 to 60 minutes with me. Please come have lunch with me. Please help me. I can't get the garbage downstairs." You know, like, there's so many basic things that I can't do right now. And what I noticed was that a fair number of people did come forward and cast their shadow on me. A fair number did not. And so I started thinking about that just a little bit, and I was thinking, we have all kinds of reasons why we're afraid to reach out. Like, we're just so settled in our safety zones, our security zones, and what we understand and what we know, and we're afraid that somebody will want too much of us or something. And so we don't look, and we don't spend enough time doing what you're suggesting, Brian, which is seeing where we can be of help, putting ourselves in other people's shoes. I'm not suggesting that I am like the be all and end all here. I'm talking about us, you know. And I would love to see us as a community become the kind of place that where we had something sort of proactive about that kind of thing, not only landing on Brian and Phyllis, but on us as a community. So I think that's someplace that we all need to sort of look at if we want to cast a longer shadow. Because it doesn't take much to cast a long shadow, in my experience.
No. The world is so bereft of caring right now.
Oh my God. And
That,
community is just freaking gone. And I can't take it. And I take it personally, and I shouldn't. And you know, it's a hard place we're all in now. And we, you know, it doesn't take much to send a text or make a phone call or watch a movie remotely with each other, you know. It just doesn't take that much to make a difference.
mhm.
But it seems to elude us in terms of thinking about it. I'm not sure why. But maybe in bringing it up, I'll remember it, and maybe we'll all remember it. I don't know, but I hope so.
My mother's gift or ministry, if you will, was acknowledging every person she met in her life. And you know, she'd compliment the butcher when she was at the butcher shop for the quality of his meat or whatever. You know, she just did it. I don't think she thought it was much of anything. And yet, when we had her wake, which was 3 months after she died, the room was filled with people who, you know, shopkeepers, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
who remembered her fondly because her comments meant so much to them. And I'll say to all of us here, that is something that each of us can do with minimal sense of risk, though a lot of people feel very scared to do it. A smile, a compliment. So when we walk into folk dancing on Saturday nights, I always find something to say to the receptionist who has a very lonely job, just sitting there punching the door to let people in.
Right.
And, you know, it's just the right thing to do. And I notice most of the folk dancers do that. They say hi to her on the way out, on the way in. And there have been a couple of times, without being asked, she's gone way out of her way to help us when we were having a problem in there, which I interpret as she really appreciates the fact that we acknowledge she exists and we're glad to see her.
Well, you know, this is what's giving me problems is I do that with everybody. Teresa's always saying to me, "My God, everybody's your best friend." But I don't, but the rest of the world is not built that way.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that hurts.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, Karen, I saw. Karen, we'll do Karen W. and then we'll do Ellie.
I can relate a little. When I walk at the park, you know, you say hello and smile at people. And it's interesting because you might not have even talked to them that much. But there's a couple people who, when you acknowledge them before, they'll kind of smile and wave at you back. And then there is someone who lives near the park, and it looks like he's always by himself, and he's thin, and he has 2 dogs. He first showed up there with 1 dog, and I acknowledged him and said, "Oh, you have your baby with you too," because you know when we get older, pretty much the dogs become our babies, and that's kind of what we refer to them with. And I said, another time I noticed he had 2 dogs. Okay. And I said, "Oh, you got another baby for your baby, you know, mate." And I bet that made your baby happy. And just talking to him, and now every time I'm at the park, he'll acknowledge me and Dan because I reached out to him in a nice, kind way, where somebody else might not have talked to him, might not have noticed him. So when he sees Dan and I, he now smiles and makes a small comment too, you know, that kind of thing. It's kind of uplifting. I never see him with anyone else. It's kind of like maybe he is by himself. and maybe and it's acknowledgement from another person. Maybe you're the only person he's talked to all day. Who knows? But it puts a smile on his face, and it puts a smile on mine. I see he's kind of happy walking with his 2 dogs by himself. And there are people at the park, oh, your babies are beautiful and all this, and the dogs seem to, unknowingly, they're innocent, seem to put a smile on other people's face. And then the other people say hi, how old's your dogs? And it starts a conversation. So you never know where that conversation might lead. Now I have one woman, she walks by herself, and she's 5 years older than me, and now we're acknowledging each other, and we've talked small talk, and that might develop into something because we seem to be getting along so well. So you just never know, reaching out with a positive, where that small, even though it's simple, where it might go. So that's all I wanted to share.
Paul talks about each of us having a particular calling or ministry, and Phyllis has what I call the pastoral ministry. She knows just about everyone up and down the street, talks with them, how's your kid doing in school and so forth. I admire her for that. Now, Ellie, you had something you wanted to contribute. Thank you, Karen.
Well, actually, 2 quick things. In scripture, the divine says that his kingdom is of the children, basically. Okay, why children? Why not adults? What, children are happy, they're eager to help. There's so many aspects. A child is innocent. They don't have filters. So when he says, be like a child, that's the way my kingdom is.
Mhm.
We have to think about, okay, what does that mean? Remember when we were children, we may have been, not in the best of places, but if we can get to that space before all that happened, how were we? Were we joyous? Were we dancers? Were we readers? Were we dreamers? What were we? That can propel us to where we are now. That can maybe shake some of those shackles off that have been put on us from whatever circumstances or events that have happened. And Brian, you were saying, basically do what you do, be who you are. There's this gal that recently moved in, and we've befriended each other, and she needed a few things, and I knew where to take her, and she was able to get help. She came from a very abusive relationship, and she told me on the way back with tears in her eyes, no one's been nice to me before. And you think about that. For those of us who do that, we say hi. Laura, you were saying that you're that way, and in your comments, and a lot of us that are that way, we don't think about that statement, no one's ever been nice to me before. We think that's common. And her statement kind of got me thinking that if no one's been nice to her, how uncommon it is nowadays to be nice to someone, to offer someone a compliment, to take someone a meal, to if you have food that that you're not going to use, or you have too much of food, and someone comes to mind, if you're able to take that food to that person, because you never know what your small acts of kindness will do to someone else.
Yes, thank you. If you look in chat, Laurie K sent a quote from Mamachi. Charlotte, you have something to contribute?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I want to say to Laurie K, sometimes we look for help on the wrong side when there's help all around. As I've been taught and raised up to believe and trust in God, we are all sisters and brothers in Christ, regardless of what color, wherever we come from. I've called Laurie Kay a couple of times, knowing she had the surgery, to see if I could be of any minister to her in helping her. I do have transportation to get around. I would have been willing to come. She came to my residence and climbed 3 flights of steps. We've been no more than loving to do the same thing for her wherever she live or wherever she, how many steps I have to climb to get to her, to come to her rescue. That's what I'm here for. We all claim we're
Thank you,
serving
baby.
God. We all claim we're sisters and brothers of Christ. But when it comes to giving help, regardless of what color our skin is or where we come from, or how little we have, how much we have, when somebody needs us, I'm not ashamed to go to them. I'm not ashamed to let people see who I am, who I serve, where I come from, and how I was raised. I didn't make no difference when I was coming up as a kid, and I don't make any difference now. I was raised up with the Chinese, the Indians, black, white, Hispanics, you name it. I was raised up with all kinds of people. And I believe in, like Brian says, what the religion that he came from, we all should look and help one another, regardless of who we are. We are all God's children. I don't care how old you are, how young you are. We are still God's children, regardless of our age or color or wherever we come from. We still belong to God, and we're supposed to love one another. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Anybody else with a
Yes.
contribution? Oh, yes.
Okay,
Christy.
so I had heard a story about an indigenous tribe someplace in another country that in order to help someone who had done wrong, maybe they stole something, maybe they did whatever, it was against the tribal rules and it just was pretty gnarly, but instead of admonishing them, the other part that ended up being torturous was to hold a 3-day ceremony where the entire tribe would tell them they're good. And that kind of, it gets me, it makes me emotional to really hold 3 days around one person to tell them they're good, because obviously they forgot and they somehow acted out in a way that really was contrary to what their good would mean. When I think about that, how many times there might be thoughts towards someone because of how they're acting, but yet not know any backstory, and yet still not maybe look at whether you know them well enough or not, this is another thing, but you still can find something good, even in their looks, their actions, or just in your heart, there is love there that's never been able to shine, or as Charlotte had said, we are obviously gifted that way to reach out to each other. But then the other part, when I heard another story about a subway, a gentleman was able to calm someone down basically because he came from love, even though they were accosting or looked to be accosting someone with harm. His projection of love turned the entire event around. So those are different attitudes about being able to, I guess, cast that shadow. And I really appreciate today. Thank you very much, Brian. And this will be my last day, as far as I know right now, to be in this place, to even show up on camera this way, but in the room, because I am moving on. And I appreciate being able to have this as a home and family, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, Lori R, yes, Lori R?
I also want us not to forget strangers. We can minister to people everywhere, anytime. We have some Facebook groups that are created in communities just to help somebody else. We had a stray cat in our yard this week, and a woman lost her cat that looked like this one. And you'd have thought I handed her a bar of gold just by allowing them to come to our house and sit and be on our property, whether we're here or not, so she could wait till the cat came back to see if it was hers. People are not used to kindness. There was a woman that needed some spices. She's fallen on hard times. She just started a new job tomorrow. And I purposely saved my old spice jars simply because one day I knew somebody would come along that I could bless. And I buy my spices in bulk. So there's lots of ways we can help people that we don't even know. And in doing that, this woman and I are having whole conversations about her worth and her job and the hard times she's fallen on. There are so many things that can derive from just being kind and giving yourself or your time to somebody that you don't even know.
Amen. We thank you, God, for having brought this family together again, for having given us opportunities for increased understanding, increased wisdom, and increased sharing of love and concern for one another. Help us to know the path that we are to follow, or at least to know what the next step is, and to have the faith to take it. Give us the inner strength to stand righteously, even in the face of stiff winds of unrighteousness. Give us the faith to hold the promise of better to come for the entire existence of this earth plane. Give us the strength to keep walking to a higher place and to reach out to those who need lifting up, knowing we have the strength to help them. Help us to have the humility to accept instruction from you and to accept the thanks of others without getting swell-headed, knowing we are simply doing what God has called us. We thank you for all the good you have dropped into our lives, all the good you are preparing, all the healings you've given us, all the healings you are preparing for us, all the love you've given us to share with others. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, and amen.